I don't know. There's a whole bunch of me. In my
Well,
face.
first of all, it
It's
like
gonna move.
loves men. It's supposed to move
Oh,
like when
no,
I
it's
like if I'm talking because I'm talking, it goes to me. But it truly like often just goes to the man in the room. Yeah, no, it's like a thing that owl does.
That's very weird.
Yeah. Right. You know what? I'm gonna just sit over here since Kevin's not down here.
I'm gonna join this.
No, I'm gonna. Oh. Hey, Cass. Hello? Can you hear us, Pat?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm gonna.
We're in a different place than normal, so it's taking us a little bit longer. And I'm gonna work with two mice, which is gonna be really hysterical.
Niece.
Two mice. Sam, is this you? Are you on?
I don't think so.
Janice, hi Danielle, hi Eric, hi Bonnie.
I'm just eating, sorry. I'm gonna go off and,
Has everybody else been watching the House floor this morning?
okay.
Quite
Yeah.
an interesting debate on
Did
the
you-
housing.
Did you see the number of amendments that were on that bill?
Yeah, I watched
We
it
can't
since
even like
10:30
look
this
at
morning.
it.
It's like 20 some bills wrapped into one with all the amendments. It's crazy. It's beyond ridiculous at this point.
I'm
That is-
hoping we can get an update on that. I did not see it, so.
Which update?
Yeah.
We can tell you a little, maybe.
Well, at this point, if it goes through, they've taken some of the teeth out of the penalties to the municipalities. So as it would apply to like the tri-towns, is we would have to show what parcels or land is available to develop on. So that would be like an update to our plan. And then they're also talking about changing like how the 5-year plan arrives, phasing it. Anything else with teeth is kind of out. But there's, as it was already mentioned, there's like 19 other bills that are in there too that, you know,
Yeah.
we'll see how they rain down on us, you know.
Yeah, everything's good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Did River call you?
No, I'll be down in it.
We don't know who that is.
Don't know who that is.
Is that like really soon?
No, I'm
Oh, that's
signed in
you.
as Sam.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
We're good, Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, but as far as we know, the bill is still actively being amended, right? They're still taking amendments.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I spent most of Thursday and most of Friday looking at the old amendments, which are mostly changed now, so.
Well, a friend of mine who's up there told me that there'll be enough. I mean, it'll really be surprising if this doesn't pass, just because the votes are there for it to pass. But the debate that's going through, I mean, it's stuff that it's repeating things that have been said in this committee as far as, you know, what are you using to get these numbers? Because they're going with the Pro J now, is where they've kind of changed that, right? And it's like, what's the formula? I mean, how does that really work? And as was mentioned this meeting last time, is they weren't that forward with how they got that number, and they weren't talking about the household. So now they're kind of putting it, they're making sure it gets out there.
Right.
They're also putting that big thing that was talking about today is like, realistically, to get developers to be able to afford putting in housing is like a 30% number. So when you have, they were talking about Monroe, which needs 300 units according to this formula, that would mean building 1,000 units, which then of course then skews the 380G numbers. And then the reality they keep saying, which has been my point, and we're actually looking at getting a grant to try to figure out where we could build, but Deep River, I mean, we just don't have the space of what's viable for this type of housing. Oh, there was another thing came out that this will be, I thought that this would incorporate the 10% that were our original 380Gs. This will be on top of that 10%. So that wasn't clear to me before. I don't know if that was clear to anybody
Wait,
else.
say that again, Dan?
Yeah, that's right. So you're in Chester, right, Pat? So
Yeah.
your number is right around ours. It's a few more, so it's 200 and some. I forget off the top of my head. So, but that'll be 200 and some on top of your 10% number that you already have. And even if you've already met with, 9.5%, it doesn't matter. These numbers from approach A allocation are going to be on top of that, which stymies me a little bit. So
It's almost to the point you have to wait until the 11th hour. Because
yeah,
it changes, it's constant change.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's still going on, but like I said, it's been an interesting morning for me, just kind of texting with my friend who's up at the Capitol and saying, what does that mean? What they just said, a lot of what does that mean? But it's we'll see.
Yeah, the cogs have been talking together about kind of, we're thinking this is probably going to pass regardless, and what can we do in the aftermath to try and make it better
Well,
collectively.
there might be some good stuff in there for the cogs. One thing I mentioned today is it could be around $1 million for each of the cogs to kind of, so, look at the silver linings of, and we do have a
Did they
need.
up that? I thought it was like 400,000.
It was, for the housing planning and for stormwater.
Or
and-
waste.
Or waste,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but again, it's all in flux. So they were just
Right.
financial was just talking about that before I turned the TV off to join this meeting. So
Ladies, are we ready to get started, or how we doing with quorum?
That is a great question. Hold on one second. Zoe, is that you, Taiki? Or is that John?
Hi, it's me, it's Zoe.
Hey, Zoe, okay, I'm counting you in quorum, so one,
Uh,
two.
Jen Miller from Old Lyme is on the
Hi,
line.
Jen, I
Right.
saw you. Five, I have 7. Juliet, so I have 8. Hold on.
Fingers crossed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could count 7. I'm gonna count Andrea. 8. We're at 8.
Shake right now.
1, 2.
How many people are on this committee?
We need 9 for a quorum. There's 17.
Jeez.
It will save time in the housekeeping. Oh, Abby.
Abby, we're good. Here we go.
Hey,
Quorum
All
has been
right, so we have a
achieved.
quorum. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Pat Bands. I'll call this meeting of the Regional Housing Committee to order. Eliza, do you want to start with a quick roll call?
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm not prepared, guys. I just want to pull up my, no, I have it. I can grab it. I just need to open one document if you don't mind waiting for 1 second. Okay, so from Chester, we have Pat Bands and Bonnie Bennett. From Clinton, Abby Pearsall. From Cromwell, I don't see Stu Popper. Are you here, Stu? No. Deep River, Daniel Smith is here. From East Haddam, we have Andrea Webster is attending the meeting, and I'm counting you for quorum. Andrea, welcome to your first meeting. From East Hampton, Julia Hodge. From Essex, Thomas Pinkowish. I don't know if Carrie is here. Nope, I don't see Carrie. Bill Warner, are you here? No.
He's on vacation.
Oh.
Today.
Okay, from Lyme, I see David Lom. Jim Irish, are you here? No. Middletown, Mark is not here. Old Lyme, Jennifer Miller is here. Old Saybrook, Nick Prevost, are you here? Nick said he was going to join, so maybe he's coming in a minute. Portland, Dan Beret, and Westbrook, Eric Salmon. I also see Ben Lovejoy from Department of Housing, Julia McGrath from Congressman Courtney's office, Janice Atkinson from the town of Essex, Zoe Chatfield, I counted you in quorum, from Taiki, Andrea Webster is from East Haddam Social Services. Who am I missing? I know I'm missing someone that is maybe not. And here is me, Eliza Lopresti, Megan Juflas, and James Tom and Ella Rogerson are interns who we will introduce in a little bit.
All right. Well, that's actually our first agenda item. So do you want to take a minute and introduce and welcome Ella and James?
Sure. So Ella and James are here with us. Today is James's first day, and Ella started last week for the summer to work on our sorry, I'm letting people in as I'm talking and I can't do two things. To work on our Department of Housing grant project and help us with videos primarily. So I'll let you guys say hello and introduce yourselves. Ella, why don't you go first?
Okay, hi, I'm Ella Rogerson. I'm a junior at Endicott College. I'm studying marketing communication with a minor in journalism. I live in East Haddam and I was able to get connected to RiverCog through Irene Haynes. I worked previously for her as a marketing intern last summer. And I'm super excited to be on this project. So it's nice to meet everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Tom. I'm a rising senior at the University of Rhode Island. I'm studying film and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to be helping the team out with this project and creating some content, doing some video production and helping out in any way I can. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Okay, great. Sounds like you've got
Go Rams.
Go Rams.
Sounds like you have the skill sets that we're going to be needing when we
hope
get our
so.
update here. So, so again, on behalf of the committee, we'd like to welcome you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to take advantage of approval of meeting minutes, and we have them for 3 months from February 25th, March 25th, and April 22nd. Unless anyone thinks they have any comments on them, I'd like to take a motion to approve all 3 of those months' meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Dan. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to our next item, which is the presentation and discussion of the public education program. So Eliza or
Can you
Megan,
share?
I don't know who's taking that.
Yeah, that's gonna be me. Let me just get my screen up. I should be able to share. Yeah. All right, as Eliza said, we have a little bit of a different tech setup today, and Kevin is not in the room with us, which makes everything more difficult. We appreciate him so much. We're gonna give a little presentation on what we are envisioning for our technical assistance grant through DOH to do some public education and commissioner training on housing. When we're talking about housing issues, there are several areas that we can focus on, and we find this when we have our conversations as a committee. You can talk about public perception, you can talk about the future visioning, you can talk about regulations, in particular zoning regulations, and also the physical construction of housing units. Each of these things do need to be addressed, but they require different tools, and there are different orders in which you can approach them. So we and you, the towns, the planners, have varying degrees of control also and influence over each of these different areas. We're going to go through each one of these. So first, public perception. Public perception refers to the general public's view towards housing, which can be positive or negative, but it's typically, at least in our conversations, focused on misinformation or NIMBYism. Shifting public perception towards a positive and or at least neutral view of housing can smooth the way for future projects. And towns have a degree of control over this because they can invest in outreach and engagement efforts early on in the process. The next topic is visioning. Visioning involves asking the public to think in advance about what they want their community to look like in the future. This includes thinking about things like where housing should go and what it should look and feel like. Typically, this is a town-led exercise that has substantial public input. We can reach a wider audience at the visioning stage than we typically can on a project-by-project basis. Towns also have a degree of control here because they can preemptively engage the public in order to neutralize negative perception and establish buy-in for future projects. So you can see on the Venn diagram, public perception relates to the visioning by establishing that buy-in of what the town's future is going to look like. Then there's regulations. We often want to jump into this area first. Regulations typically refer to zoning changes. Zoning can facilitate or discourage different types of housing to make it either harder or easier or more or less expensive to build. So zoning relates to the vision because it makes it possible for the vision to be realized, and towns can use zoning as a tool in order to implement the future vision. And you can see how that relates on the Venn diagram. We're establishing sort of an order of magnitude. You have public perception where you get buy-in for the vision, and the regulations are used to implement the vision. And then the final piece of the puzzle is physical construction of housing units. And I put an asterisk there because it's not necessarily new construction. It may also be creation of units. Constructed units should be a realization of the vision. So at this point, the units being constructed should follow along with the vision that you've established from the community. This demonstrates follow through on the visioning process, and it enables a town to establish trust with the public. Towns have the least control over the physical construction of units, and yet public opposition is often the strongest at the physical construction and specific project level. The technical assistance that we're looking at for the housing grant is focused on public perception and vision to help towns establish buy-in for what type of housing is going to be built. Why are we starting here? We did that survey a few months ago, and we found that 5 of our towns had future land use maps. Future land use maps are a key visioning document in establishing where and what kind of housing is going to be developed. 4 of our towns had invited the public to participate in a visioning exercise at all. 3 towns felt that the public had an understanding of where housing should go, and only 1 town felt that the public understood what type of housing was needed. So we found that there was some foundational effort that needed to take place in order to establish that buy-in with the public before projects start coming in. Efforts to tackle housing issues often start with regulations and construction because that feels like you are physically doing something very quickly and it's more satisfying. But regulations are a tool to implement a plan, and without a vision plan, zoning is less effective and it lacks the public buy-in. I like to think of it as trying to do a puzzle without the picture on the box of what the puzzle is supposed to look like when you're done with it. So this creates an opportunity for misinformation and mistrust with the public because they don't have a clear understanding of where the town is going. So instead, what we want to do is start by establishing buy-in from the community. And what RiverCog wants to do is to train towns to lead each step in this process and to provide additional tools and assistance for that process where needed. And our expectation for this shouldn't be to establish 100% support, but at least to establish sufficient transparency and understanding to neutralize NIMBY movements and to give commissioners confidence to move forward with projects that align with the vision and the plan. So we have our fun steps to building the foundation in the housing conversation. And this is kind of how we see the training modules moving forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the 4 steps. And for each one, at the end of the overview, I want to take a pause and ask for some feedback from the group. So step 1, creating future land use maps. This is actually something that is required in the general statutes as part of the plan of conservation and development. Although the wording is a little bit amorphous, when it's done effectively, it can be really helpful in laying the groundwork for zoning regulations and also for future projects. So a future land use map is a visualization of how a community wants to use its public and private lands within a given time frame. It's also a shared vision of where houses and businesses should go, and where farmland and open space should go, and where recreational opportunities should go. It's really just a laying out of everything in the community. And it's a guide to help with policymaking and to guide interim decisions for the future vision. What it's not is it's not an exact prediction of future land use patterns, and it's also not your zoning map. So here's an example of a future land use map. You can see it's really conceptual. I pulled this from Mission Valley, which is where I used to live when I lived in San Diego. I remember when they were creating this, so it was top of mind as a really conceptual vision. And you can see it's not tied to specific parcels. It has these bubbles over areas with descriptions saying, for example, Eastern Mission Valley will focus on higher density development with an emphasis on connectivity and comfort for pedestrians, cyclists, and other modes of transportation. So it kind of gives you a feeling for what your area is going to be, but it's not specific regulations. It does give you a roadmap for what those future regulations might be. Here's another example from the same area. This dials in a little bit more. So this is high concept. This is dialing in a little bit more, still not parcel specific. It's more area based, but each of the colors for the areas will have a description in the plan. And then there will be several zones associated with each general land use area. And here's one from Middlebury, Connecticut, because I wanted to give a local example to show that, you know, these are in Connecticut as well. It's not just a California thing. But again, you can see it's very high level, not tied to parcels, not very specific. So note that future land use maps are conceptual, high level, not tied to specific parcels, not tied to specific zones. They are an important component of a plan of conservation and development, and they're a way to prioritize your POCD goals for different locations. And it's helpful for evaluating projects for consistency with goals, because I'm sure this happens in everybody's land use commissions where a project comes in, and because your POCDs cover goals that are economic development, housing, conservation, all of the different subjects, when a project comes in, there's a tendency to cherry pick which goals are going to be prioritized based on whether or not you like the project, as opposed to whether it's the right project for the right place. So it's important to tie these goals and prioritize these goals to specific areas so that your commissions know which goals to prioritize for a given project based on where it is. The purpose of the training would be to cover the purpose and process of creating a future land use map, the relationship between the future land use map and the plan of conservation and development, as well as zoning regulations, and how to lead the creation of a future land use map with public involvement. So we'd be training commissions to do this work. Feedback from you, questions, you can answer any question in any order. But what we want to know is, how useful do you think this will be for your commissions? Do you think they'll be receptive to this kind of training? Is there specific content within this training that you typically have issues with that you think we should focus on? And do you have any supplemental video content ideas that might help illustrate this point? I'll pause.
This is Jen from Old Lyme.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think this would be good for us as a smaller town, and having struggled in the past few years with, getting the concept of affordable housing or starter homes over to the people to differentiate it. Section 8 housing or something like that, vouchers. I think that's important for a town such as ours, and I think this would be a good way of, an additional helpful tool in our toolbox to do that.
This is Janice Atkinson from Essex. And the town of Essex has recently engaged the public in 5 sessions for the POCD that's coming up. So I feel that in some ways, the first 2 parts of what you're saying has perhaps been covered. And I will say that the session on affordable housing was rather contentious. So I think we need to do a lot of education with the public.
Yeah, I was at that one.
So this is Bonnie Bennett. I'm an alternate from Chester. I couldn't agree with Janice more. I think I love the idea, as a tool, but well before that, I think your first one of perception is really where I think we need to start in terms of what the needs are in the town and why different housing is important. And you said it's either your people have a positive or a negative. I think in most cases, people are ambivalent. They just don't think about it. So I almost feel as though the first step for commissions should be more sort of public education, the need for housing, what it will do for your town, why it's important. And then this second step of the future land use map, I sense already people back coming up as to why without that foundation.
Why do we need to do a future land use map?
Right. I mean, again, the idea, I think what we're trying to achieve ultimately is where do we think about housing? Ultimately, I think, yes, all this is the POCD, which is great. But as far as this committee is concerned, it's really affordable housing or housing, whether it's a big A affordable or small A affordable, why housing is important, get people engaged in general, because you do then have the NIMBYism coming, the people in the neighborhood will come and fight it primarily. But you need to have the town as a whole, feel that it's a good thing to do.
I think what we're thinking, at least with this step, and we do have 3 other steps as well. What we were thinking with this step is to get them thinking about housing in general and how it relates to the rest of their town before you bring in the affordability component, because it can circumvent some of the knee-jerk reaction to some of these conversations. Because the second you say affordable housing, people automatically dig their heels in on what they think, one way or the other. So it's kind of a sidestep approach for something that towns are supposed to be doing as part of their POCDs anyways. With the idea that once we get the vision of where housing is going to go, the conversation of how expensive that housing isn't really one for public discussion.
Daniel, what do you have to say?
As a reminder, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, that an amendment in the bill they're reviewing today over this will say that every town has to represent in their POCD actual land parcel that would be available, not necessarily that they're building on, but it's like one step farther than just the land use map. You have to say, and this is land we would have available for affordable housing. So that's about to be mandated. So this will be greatly useful to get to that next step. And I think that's from the debate, that's why they're actually adding that in there, is because now the towns have even done their land use maps, much less identified parcels.
John?
Hi, I am a little bit ambivalent about future land use maps. In part, well, I'll say in, I don't know, almost 25 years of being in this business in Connecticut and working on POCDs, the only time I have ever used a future land use map was trying to stop something. Because the future land use maps are, it's one color, right? And there's a lot of nuance missing in any given part of town. And so the question is, is that residential? Okay, so it's a residential future land use. Is it mid-density residential? Is it high density residential? And if it's, if it's colored in for mid-density and someone proposes high density on a very suitable parcel that just happens to be in the middle of that color, people will scream, and say, no, it's only supposed to be low density or mid density. So I've seen it used almost exclusively to fight things rather than to enable things, and generally have a bias towards let's use our words and our policies. So, if it's in a residential area and it's not going to create traffic and there are utilities, well, then that's great. Let's build the heck out of it. But to put a single color on a future land use map, to me, is just asking for fights. But, I see their value.
Juliet?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with John that that's how they're used. I do believe in them, and I think they can be done in such a way, that you can not just have the one color, that you can use a combination of your words and the colors on the map to try to get where you're going. I guess, I mean, any training for any commissions, I'm 100% behind, because I think the first roadblock sometimes is the commission themselves. It's not even I haven't even gotten to the public yet. It's the commission that doesn't want the housing. So finding a way to get the commission members who change, periodically on that same page of that housing is important has been the hardest challenge I've had in all, 3 or 4 towns that I've worked in. So I don't know. The public is secondary to that.
Yeah. Thank you. David?
I think one of the biggest things that we talked about or you mentioned was trust. And the state legislature is not doing anything to help us by taking a bill that has a completely different header on it and substituting in a 92-page amendment that is just going to jam it all down our throats. I went to several functions yesterday, and they didn't want to talk about remembering the soldiers. They wanted to talk about what's the state going to do to us. So, whatever you think about building trust, the state's, burning it down as fast as they can. And I'm talking about HB 5002.
Amen.
Anyone else?
Okay, good feedback. Moving on to step 2. We want to do a training on visualizing housing types and impacts. And what do we mean by this? I'm going to start with a hypothetical. What does a development for 24 units look like on 3 acres? So depending on your other regulations, this could be 1 8-unit building on each acre. It could be 2 4-unit buildings on each acre. It could be 4 2-unit buildings or duplexes on each acre. 8 single-family units on each acre on 1/8 acre lots. 3 8-unit buildings on 1 acre with 2 acres open, or 1 24-unit building on 1 acre with 2 acres open. And these are just some of the possibilities of configurations. And each is going to have a different look and feel, and each is going to come with a different impact. I think that when the public and even the commissions hear that it's a development for 24 units, that seems crazy, and everyone has a specific picture in their mind of what that is. And so we want to do some explanation of the variety and what that means. So here's just visualizations. Obviously, we have our wonderful interns here who will help us come up with how to showcase some of these differences. But again, here you can see visualizations of different types of density. The image on the right I thought was really interesting because it's the same number of units, high rise, low coverage, low rise, high coverage, and medium rise, medium coverage. Obviously, this is more intensive than what we would be looking at in our region, but just to show the point that the same number of units can look very different in a variety of configurations. We propose that our training in this area would cover what density is and what it looks like, how density relates to other zoning provisions like height and lot coverage, how things like building articulation, orientation, and design, as well as site layout, can impact the feel of density, and how to evaluate trade-offs based on community goals and project impacts. And back to our feedback slide. What do we think about this one?
I like all things visual. I think that helps a lot. It helps people.
I agree. I also think that density is like the hardest thing for people to wrap their heads around if it's not something that they're used to seeing. And I think you can make something very engaging out of visualizing the same number of units on the same acreage in different ways, and to see the ways that that could be really spread out, or that could be a way to both provide housing while conserving the environment. And there's just so many ways to make it demonstrate how it can actually be very beneficial for everybody. But you need that visual aspect.
Do we think that maybe that one should come before future land use map? I don't know, that's just food for thought. If people have a better idea of what different types of housing look like, maybe they might be more apt to put different types in different places. We don't have to answer that question right now.
I think it should definitely come through. Yeah.
Okay. The third, I think, is one that everyone is quite interested in: how to steer housing conversations. We know these can go off the rail pretty quickly. Conversations around housing get controversial, and we don't need to let them. Commissioners are often the ones that are fielding the comments. They are the gatekeepers. They are the arbiters of all of these conversations. Meetings can often become hijacked from misinformation. Fear mongering can derail a project that's otherwise good. There are strategies that exist that can keep good plans and projects moving forward. Before the public is invited in for visioning exercises, we think it's important that the commissioners understand and practice these strategies for managing the conversations and keeping things on track. And putting out the reminder again, the goal is not to turn every no into a yes, but to neutralize the impact of the outsized negative commentary so that commissioners can do their jobs. And for any Friends fans, just some examples of some of the tools of how to pivot your conversation and get it back on track. And these were from a presentation that I gave with, and if anyone remembers Elizabeth Esposito, she was with Mylona McBroom, and then SLR gave this presentation on having housing conversations, and these were hers, so do credit. So we propose that this training would cover strategies and tools for structuring the conversation, handling misinformation, diffusing tension in a housing conversation, and keeping the discussion on topic. And also to understand the role of public comment in different situations. Feedback?
So is it your intent to train us, train the volunteers, train the commissioners? Like, what's the, how would this be rolled out?
Training commissioners, that's the idea. Our proposal is to put together a series of 4 commissioner training exercises where we want to package it in such a way that either we can go do the training can be done by town staff, or the training is module online and it can be self-service, but we want to make sure that it does have a feedback mechanism where we can make sure that people are understanding the concepts that are being presented. And this is only part of our TA project. So there are other components as well, but this is part of it. Ben?
Megan and team, would you envision these trainings being robust enough to, in theory, cover the affordable housing training and additional 3 hours that all commission members are required to complete?
Yes.
And would this be something that you would be able to help the municipality, say, like help do the self-certification process, therefore making all planning commissions and zoning commissions compliant with the statutes?
Yep. That's the goal.
Thank you.
How long is each training?
We're thinking an hour and a half-ish.
Yeah, and a lot of that will be interactive, like it's not just like a lecture or someone like talking at them, it's gonna be videos or like an exercise, like Megan was saying with feedback, just to make sure that it's understood. And also there is training out there that exists that is just here, watch this video for an hour and a half, and sometimes it doesn't sink in
Yeah.
always.
Yeah, so we were basing it off of lesson plans like a teacher would use in a classroom, with active engagement exercises. And the goal would be, again, we could come in and do this training, or town staff could do the training, or it could be self-service online. We're gonna have a couple of different ways to do it. But either way, we want to make sure that it is interactive and engaging to the point where they can then take what they've learned from that and apply it going forward.
I might add, we consulted with some teachers.
Who are our mothers who are retired, but they were excellent teachers.
Can I clarify Ben's question and your response to that? He asked if it meets the entire 4 hours of mandated training required. You said yes, because I thought it was 1 hour of the 4 hours had to be housing.
1 hour of the 4 hours has to be housing. Yes.
It would meet that requirement, not the whole 4 hours.
Not any other, well,
I don't know, I mean,
There's-
if we're
I don't think
talking
there's
about
anything-
like,
I don't think
Nothing
there's
that
any
says-
requirement for what the other 3 hours have to be.
Right.
I think there
Yeah.
are suggestions on to what the subject matter should be. As far as what I've read from the OPM guidance document on that, only 1 hour is required to be on affordable housing, but that doesn't preclude a commission from spending their 4 hours on housing. And in the ones that I've attended and been a part of and also hosted myself, honestly, it seems like 4 hours would probably be a good idea, because the 1 hour doesn't really sufficiently cover, all of what I think really would help a commission make, informed decisions. But yeah, I don't know. We can get clarification on that if needed, but I'm pretty sure the law only requires that 1 hour of affordable component. And the
that
other,
was my
We want them to
understanding.
learn about the other stuff too, as much as how.
Yeah,
I need
yeah,
to run
and
through
I
the
think
other stuff.
too, you could make an argument that some of these things like the future land use map and the visualizations, like, could be extrapolated into other subjects.
Areas, yeah.
Yeah.
So any other feedback on managing conversations? All right. And then the final step in the process would be aligning regulations with the vision. So if a vision is a policy guide, regulations are a translation of the vision into a set of rules and requirements. It's a tool for incentivizing and disincentivizing certain development, a means of evaluating specific projects, and a key part of implementing the vision. Regulations should be consistent with vision plan, but they're not the vision. They are an implementation device. So here's kind of a visual example. If we have a concept future land use map of anywhere Connecticut, then say we have transit station mixed use as one of our conceptual future land uses, then we would have specific regulations to implement what that vision is, things like unit density, setbacks and lot coverage, minimum and maximum parking, and building height, just to name a few. And so we propose that our training would cover the relationship between regulations and vision plans, how regulations work to incentivize or disincentivize different types of development, the trade-offs between different requirements, and evaluating regulations for consistency with the vision. And just as a note, we wouldn't necessarily cover in the training how to create different types of regulations. That is something that we're looking at for our fact sheets and other training materials. But what we would want to do is prepare the commissions to undertake that next step for themselves to implement their own visions. So feedback here, would it be useful for commissions to learn how regulations work to incentivize and disincentivize different things, what the trade-offs are, and how that relates to the vision they want to see?
I think it would be. I don't want to give away all my secrets to them though.
I know it's kind of it's almost like a planning 101 sort of process that we're doing. But I will just give an example. I sit as an alternate on the planning commission in Old Saybrook, and we have pedestrian nodes in our land use plan. And we had an application for a drive-through that wanted to go in the pedestrian node that the commissioners were generally in favor of because it supports economic development. And so weighing between these goals and future visioning and how to prioritize different ones and what trade-offs are between different pieces, at least from my experience there, I think would be useful.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, we think that having informed commissioners are key to moving housing projects forward. They are the gatekeepers of these projects, so training them is the first step. The learning objectives for this exercise would be they will know at the end how to create and use a vision plan, how to evaluate projects based on the vision plan, which implementation tools to use and how to use them, and they'll be able to guide the public discourse on these topics. And we will be here, part of our technical assistance program is to be here to help along the way. So it's not like we're just putting these together and sending them out into the world and saying good luck. We also plan to be part of the process as well. So any other questions?
You cover the general timeline when you expect these different parts to be available, or when you
So
would
we're
roll them out?
We are going to have a series of videos completed by the end of the summer with our interns. We should start rolling them out. I mean, I would say by the end of the summer, we will have all of the lesson plans completed. That we can start rolling out. It'll probably be iterative. I don't think we plan to release all 4 of them at the same time. We'll start with the first one, do a run through, and go from there.
Project will be completed in 12 months,
Yes,
but we
I think,
prefer to roll the things out as they're completed
right.
in that time.
I do have, I'm a little dense on this, but I'm trying, I love the final slide, which says, you know, how you're going to create your vision plan. Is the vision plan, I'm trying to figure out where in your 4 modules is the visioning plan? I mean, so I guess, is it the creating the future land use map? I guess it will maybe be flushed out by your 1, 2, 3, 4, but to me, I was trying to think of ultimately it's the visioning plan, which is key with public participation, which brings in your public perception. But you know, the steps 1, 2, 3, 4 ultimately result in a visioning plan, I guess, but I'm trying to figure out how all this fits together so that you are completing these goals that you have on your final slide.
Go back to the I was very excited by this Venn diagram because it just sort of happened on accident, but so I think we are focusing on the perception and the vision to establish the buy-in, right? So part of establishing the vision is having that public engagement and creating the future land use map. Part of creating the future land use map is being able to have an open conversation with the public about what different types of housing and density and things like that are and where they should go. So it's kind of all encompassing to get to the vision, but the ultimate vision is portrayed in the map.
Fine. I mean, it brings in what Janice Atkinson was saying too, and I was trying to bring in is that you needed the public participation. I didn't really see it in your 1, 2, 3, 4, but you know, creating your vision map or your future land use map is, the idea is that in those training modules, you will talk about how you engage the public in doing that.
Yes, exactly. And how to talk to them about where different types of housing would go, what that might look like, where you might need it, what different people might need from their housing, all those types of conversations.
Yep. I just didn't see that in this these modules, but your under explanation and wonderful begin the first, I really could get it from the first, you know, the tackling the housing issues and your goals, but in between I was trying to, how would we put these together, making sure we were engaging the public in each and every step almost, as well as training the commissioners, which is key. But okay, thank you.
And we are also trying to fill a niche too, because there are a lot of materials that are already available talking about affordable housing, talking about statistics. We are going to create some that are specific for our region. We also plan to provide a resource page to link to additional resources that are already out there. We're going to curate some that can be used for different parts of this process as well. A lot of what we are trying to do is to bring the temperature down on conversations around affordable housing and making it more pragmatic and practical, but also giving the tools to address heated conversations when they come up.
Can I ask another question? Somebody had walked in right sort of during this slide, so I don't know if it was spoken about, but I mean, I think a big issue is we talk about affordable housing and what we need, and we have a vision and get to all that, except you really have to convince a developer to build that. And with the cost of the thing of building materials and land and whatnot these days, you know, I can envision your zoning regs, maybe you have design guidelines or you have certain criteria that add a lot of cost to a project. So that might fit the vision that the people have, so you don't lose the trust there, but there's no developers ever going to build that. So what's the point? You don't end up with the housing that you need. So somewhere along the way, I think a lot of people, and I've noticed this, you know, over the years, that the public seems to have this notion that, you know, we can control a lot more than we can, you know, like if you have retail in a commercial zone, we should somehow be able to say no Dollar Generals, you know, that kind of mentality. But there's the same thing with housing too, that somehow that we can, you know, pick the design, but you know, you really can't. And if it's affordable housing, you can't be putting all these design guidelines on because they won't be able to do it. So I think a lot of these conversations sort of dead end because with all the training in the world, you still need a developer who's going to do it.
That's absolutely fair. And in fact, one of the conversations that we were having before we jumped on this call was an idea for a video about how a project pencils, like explaining the phrase does it pencil, and the trade-offs that developers have to make. These things are on the cause expense side, and these things are on the reduce expense side. And even nonprofits can't operate at a deficit because then they would stop operating at some point. So
I mean,
there is a
lot of subsidizing any of that. I don't know.
Right. So, you know, we acknowledge that towns have the least control over the construction of housing units, right? There are tools and techniques that you can use to encourage developers to come in. Some of them are just, you know, making it easier and making it known that you want a specific type of development. And that helps, but that's not a guarantee, as you say, to get exactly what you want in the place that you want it. So we're trying to focus on the earlier steps in the process that we can control and then move into the next two phases of the regulation and then partnering with developers or siting properties or marketing, different things you can do to try and incentivize construction. But again, admittedly, that is something that we have the least control over. I think what we can do in educating the commissioners is help them understand the trade-offs in cost of construction versus the things that they're asking for.
And then just another quick question, like how does this all, when it's all said and done and we have our vision plan and we have the regulations to implement it, how does 830G work with that? Because that's going to wipe out on any zoning regs. So
That's a really great question. That's something that.
How does 830G work with anything?
I don't.
I know, it's rhetorical.
I think.
But I
The
think
best-
about that because then they just will say, all right, well, never mind. I see that you want this housing here and you're making it easy and these are all the things we have to do, but they're going to be like, yeah, but I'm going to do 830G so I don't have to do any of your design guidelines or something like that.
Right, I think not in all cases, certainly, but, and maybe Pat, you can speak to this a little more because you've had many projects coming through lately with 830G. But I think more developers would prefer to work within the regulations and the plans as much as possible than to try and forego all of them in the name of 830G. They tend.
That is absolutely true. The developers that we currently have in Chester have all said they do not want to go the 830G route. They would prefer to not have all of the encumbrances of that regulation. And if they're a local developer, they tend to want to work, they talk to you early on and they kind of get the temperature of what they're about to come into. And there's conversations back and forth about what we would like to see and what they would like and what works for them. But we
Right, but then how do we
run
ever get
into
to our
the-
affordable numbers? How do we ever get to the 10% though if we're
We don't
not
get to the
respecting
10%.
either? It's great to have the housing, but if it's still not going to count.
Yeah. Well, I understand there's some discussion about that right now in 5002, so.
Yeah, I haven't looked lately to see where that is.
Yeah, who knows what it'll mean tomorrow.
We are living in no man's land right now. But these are all good fundamental principles to try and work with anyways, regardless of what comes out of that.
Yeah. Thomas, I see your chat. Basically adding on to what Pat said. Yeah.
We try and do good planning despite any regulations that might come out. But I think, the more that our commissioners understand the process, the better decisions they'll be able to make. Andrea?
Hi, this is my first time attending one of your meetings, so I'm just kind of trying to take everything in, and there's so much that I don't know that I need to learn, but I had two questions. One being, has anyone from East Haddam been attending these meetings regularly? I've seen emails of East Haddam commissioner members, but I don't know if they're attending.
Jim was.
Okay.
I feel like lately he hasn't been
Okay.
around. I know it's like a hard time.
Yeah.
In the day, but
Yeah.
Jim has come. Irene was here last time also.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just I wasn't sure how frequently these meetings were getting attended. And then I'm just wondering, and maybe this is a silly question because again, there's so much I just don't know. I did just go to the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness training last week, their ATI training, and listened to like the most amazing talk from Alex Horowitz, who is from the Pew Charitable Trust, about using existing construction, like existing buildings. I mean, he mostly was speaking to densely populated areas, cities, using like abandoned office space, but it just made me think about the unused buildings in our town that I have no idea if they would be transferable to housing, but I just wonder if looking at that would help make it a little more palatable because those buildings are already constructed. And I was just wondering if you had talked about that or.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent idea. Doing some sort of adaptive reuse or conversion of either office buildings, or even we've talked about large residential properties that might be converted into multiple units because household sizes are much smaller now. Those kinds of conversations. And that's why I put the asterisk next to construction, acknowledging it's not necessarily new construction, but at least the creation of units where there were not. And I think that's something that would be a really important topic of conversation in the visioning process as well.
I just wanted
Spot
to
on.
shout
No,
out that Chester adopted an adaptive reuse regulation last summer now. So if you wanted one nearby to look at, so.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll just give my little plug now that we are doing a regional brownfields roundtable on June 9th. So in case, and Andrea, I don't think you were probably on the email yet when I sent that out, but anyone on this call and anyone in the region that wants to learn about brownfields, which are often, the unused buildings in our town, please join us at Middlesex Community College the morning of June 9th. I think it starts at 9, but I have an invite. I can shoot around again to everybody.
I would love that. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Andrea, can I ask a question? Are you on staff in East Haddam, or are you with, do you have an affordable housing committee now?
Those are great questions. I'm the social services coordinator for East Haddam Youth and
okay.
Family Services. And since beginning this job in September of 2023, I've just continued to get phone calls from residents who are getting priced out of living in East Haddam, and they have nowhere to go, and they're oftentimes looking at being homeless. Because wait lists, by the time they call me, getting on a wait list is not an option anymore. And my understanding is that there has been conversation about the creation of affordable housing here. I need to learn more about that. I need to start attending zoning meetings. It's just become, I've just become very much aware that housing is a really pressing issue here in terms of social services. So I feel like I need to get more involved with it because people are calling me with questions and I'm directing them to 211, and that it shouldn't be that situation, but it is. So
Sorry to interject. Sorry to interject. I just wanted to say that, Andrea, I think it's really amazing that you're here and representing that perspective from social services. And I think that actually that's a huge missing piece of that early community engagement of reminding folks that when you're talking about affordable housing, it's not abstract of just because your population is growing or you're anticipating growth. Like a lot of the time, it's just about stability and sustaining the community that is already existing. And I'm all for both, but the growth can be scary. But the reality is, like, a lot of it's not even about growth at all. It's about making sure that people who are already from the community have access to housing at all the phases of their lives and not just the phases where they have the most money.
That's exactly what our situation is here. Our town, historically, I'm learning, is really, they avoid development and growth. The town really likes being small and rural, and any suggestion of development is generally kind of shot down. But this is not so, this is literally for me about sustainability, because people who've lived here their entire lives can't stay here anymore. And we have a huge aging population. The overwhelming majority of our 9,000 residents are 65 and over, and they are getting priced out, or they can't stay in the homes that they're in because they're one or two people in a big home they can't afford to take care of anymore. So yeah, it's definitely for like for me, this is about sustainability. It's just keeping the people that live here housed. As much as I would love to, I personally would love to expand, but the town probably can't, engage in that yet.
Yeah, what you're expressing, Andrea, is very common to a lot of the towns in this region. So anyway, are there any other comments on the public education program? Otherwise, I think we should move on. We have a couple other agenda items. So any final feedback or questions for Megan or Eliza on that? Thank you, guys. This is so needed. It is so needed. I think it's what most of us on this call feel like we need that help out there. It's just we're not getting anywhere with that. So so this is wonderful. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that. So
Oh, do we want to pull up do we have the logo available? We do have a logo for it, if you guys want to see it.
For our program.
of course you have a logo. I wouldn't expect anything less.
Should I
Yeah, how do you do that?
and then
Yeah.
I'm
if you
afraid
want-
to.
No, it's okay. If she can join and share screen,
Okay.
we can talk about the next item while she pulls that up. so we're
Yeah.
not putting her under
Yeah.
pressure.
And Megan, I
Um,
just want to I just want to commend everyone on this call. I know I've said this before, but this is an unprecedented partnership between the DOH and a COG operating this fashion. And the results of this project came out of work that sort of came from both Deep River, Chester, and now Old Saybrook. And the towns in this region are sort of leading the charge on what this a partnership between an agency, a COG, and the towns can look like when it comes to addressing. And I know there was a comment previously about what the state is doing, to help out. And I know that there's a lot of trust issues when it comes to this thing, but I hope that this can be used as an example of improving trust, to show that when a community is trying to make an effort to move forward with this, that the state understands it's not an easy process and is looking to provide the resources where appropriate to help the municipalities move forward on this end. And I can't speak to legislation that's passing. I can only speak to what the project is that I was handed in. Everyone here on this call and everyone that's on this group should, carry a little pride that you're setting a sample, an example for the rest of the state. And so thank you to everyone that's on this call and to everyone who volunteers for the continued work that you're all doing. It's not going to be perfect, but it's gonna let us know either this is a good way to move forward or this is not a good way to move forward. And that's just as valuable in both ways. But I do have high hopes and a lot of faith that River Cog's going to get it right. I continue to say that you're the little cog that could. So keep it up and keep picking away at all this. It's been a pleasure
there's the
working with all of you.
logo. There's the logo. And Ben, we so value your involvement with us as well. You've been such an asset for all of us. So thank you for participating in our discussions as well.
And this program is really great as well. The flexibility that you're providing through this program for us to do work that needs to be done is very helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to move to the next item while you're waiting, or?
Do we have it?
Yeah, I think I can do it. So I can just share my screen.
Yeah, you should be
Okay.
able to. I think she's all set. And then
All right.
the next item is me and it's super fast, so.
Okay, let me see if I can share.
Hi, Ella. Nice to see your face.
Hi. Oh God, wait, hold on.
You want me to, talk
Yeah,
about the
let's
next
talk
thing?
about yours.
Looking at that, okay. I think, Pat, the next thing is probably just the future, next upcoming meetings.
Okay,
If
go
you
ahead.
may Just run down that. So, I'm not gonna go through like a whole schedule, but all that we wanted to let you guys know is that we have talked with Susie Beckman, who many of you know runs our, Regional Economic Development Committee. And we talked about doing a couple more joint meetings because we did a joint meeting last month, in which a lot of the regional EDC members came and, I think added a lot to the conversation. And so The next meeting in June, we are going to be doing as a joint meeting, and it's going to be a meeting specifically about school redevelopment. So a little bit about, I think Andrea already came off, but a little bit about like using up some of those abandoned buildings that towns might have. Bill Warner, I see you join the call. I want to talk to you after. So we're putting together a little panel on that. We also were talking about in September doing a joint meeting about brownfields. There was one other one we talked about. Do you remember what month that was? I lost my email. So I'm like I have like a really crazy looking handwritten thing that I'm reading off of. So I apologize in advance, but they will join our meetings at our regular meeting times. We had talked about maybe doing one in the future during their regular meeting time. So that might be coming up, but we'll let you all know. We're just trying to combine topics that we think both groups would be interested in.
Particularly to the point that construction is not something that towns typically have a lot of influence over. Our EDC is more in the real estate space and might be able to help us out.
Yeah, and there's a couple developers on there as well. So it's an interesting mix of people, I think, when we all get together.
Plus, they think this committee is really cool and they just.
They do. They really want to be the housing committee, so we're gonna let them into our space.
Oh my gosh, we have a lot to live up to here. Huh?
They're all interesting, as you all know, it goes hand in hand, the two topics, so that's where we're going with that. So be on the lookout for those kind of things coming up.
Yeah.
And we did want to use one of our summer meetings, probably August, to do like a test run of one of our lesson plans with you guys. Like you could be our beta testers to make sure that we're on the right track and it's what you're looking for.
Is that what we were gonna do? I think that was the other joint one, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Yep. Including them in that as well.
Are we still doing the all virtual, or is there hybrids mixed in? I know we kind of went back and forth on this.
Good question.
People want to come in person?
Only if you make cookies.
We can do that. I
We
am
can do
always
that.
open to that. We were having such a tough time getting quorum that we didn't, although the cookies might help.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe I'll send out a little email poll.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, because I know I've had some people say to me they like coming in person. They enjoy coming in person. So perhaps hybrid's the best. Maybe not every month, but some of the months. So all right, anything else on meetings?
Not from us.
So moving on to everybody's favorite topic, Fair Share Study Update.
So I have the presentation that Eliza sent out. I wasn't planning to pull it up in the interest of time, but I can if people are interested. Or I can just speak to it. You know what?
Well, I feel like because of what's happening with HB 5002, like we don't really know what's
gonna happen.
We don't know.
I'm just gonna pull it up because the graphics are fun.
Okay, so starting off by saying this could change in like 2 hours, it could be completely different. So
well, the Fair Share study is what it is. It's whether or not or how they're planning to implement it that we don't know.
Right. So the latest version of the legislation that I saw, which is quite old now because I think it was Friday. Had still the language in it from the study. So it still had like the requirements for the study that had the study following Open Communities Alliance methodology. It didn't specify which method they were going to use from the study.
Megan, there's been an update just so that you're aware and the commission's aware. The legislature is currently debating that bill. They have so far passed Amendment A and Amendment Package B, which essentially amends the amendment. And in that, the First Amendment did not have clarifying language to state which of the alternatives was going to be proposed. The currently adopted amendment specifies alternative A, I believe.
Okay.
Let me double check that.
Alternative A and approach B.
Yeah, that's what they like originally said, I think, but.
That's what the study
The-
says.
Yeah, the study has, oh man, where did it go? Alternative approach A is the current language,
Okay.
that's being, included, and I can put that amendment in the chat if anyone is interested in it.
Ben, I have just a quick question about these amendments. So you said all amendment package, are they're, because I see that there's the first original bill that we're talking about is an amendment, and then there was 35 amendments on top of that. Are they packaging some of those as like one vote?
No, so the initial amendment that came out that was supposed to be part of the debate that was gonna happen potentially on Thursday of last week was a 92-page strike all
Right.
amendment. They did not call that bill discussion because there was concerns about that amendment that was going to become the underlying bill. So over the weekend, they worked on some language and they released an amendment, I think on Saturday or Sunday, which it was a separate amendment that would have to be adopted after the first 92-page amendment, and it changed the amendment. So it's like you can think of those two working together because
So
one
the
doesn't
13
function without
pager
the other.
modifies the 92 pager?
Correct, yes. So the second amendment that was called removes some information from the 92-page strike all amendment and adds some language in. And one of the things that it added in was the clarifying in the language that is using fair share which model to use, which they wrote alternative A. So,
Well,
and then it also changed it to 25% of the allocation of A. So
Okay.
it's a little, I would let them all finish because they're still debating and there's other amendments that could be adopted. I'm just saying those are the two that actually have become the underlying bill that they are debating currently.
Okay.
And you kind of have to read them in tandem. It's kind of tough because you have to kind of go to the amendment and then go to the second amendment where it says strike subdivision 4 of section E and replace it with this. So you kind of have to go back and forth. It's difficult to track, and I'm not there, but as someone who used to be,
And a
that's
third
the way they track
amendment,
the language on it.
a third amendment just popped up, an amendment, a Schedule C.
There's actually 35 amendments that.
Well, no, I'm talking about if you look under not the uncalled amendment, I'm talking about called amendments.
Correct. So that's going to happen pretty much all day long. They're going to call amendments, and let me see if that got called and passed.
Has it just happened since we've been online? Because I was looking
Yes.
at it earlier.
So House rejected House Amendment C.
Okay.
So they'll do that. My guess is this will have, at this rate, probably 16 hours at least. I would guess that this may get a final vote at this rate, probably around 3 or 4 in the morning today.
Well, all that said, the report is out and the report has the recommendations from the Fair Share study. We don't know exactly what's going to be implemented, but I can tell you at least what was in the study, the good and the bad, because we saw some things that we liked, that we were concerned about that were in there. We also saw some things that we didn't. So things that we're watching. I'm not gonna like do the whole spiel because you guys know the background of this. Basically, they selected alternative 1, which to calculate need, they looked at underproduction of housing units, homelessness, and then structural mismatch for households at less than 80% area median income. Here were our graphics that we used to explain this. Basically, underproduction, we don't have enough units for the existing population. You can see that on the left. So the solution is to add new units to account for things like overcrowding, household formation rates, and a healthy vacancy rate to create a less constrained supply. That was 36,000 new units. Homelessness, that's sort of the same thing. We don't have enough units for existing households experiencing homelessness. So we add new units to account for existing households experiencing homelessness. That's approximately 3,000 new units. what structural mismatch does, and we've talked about this at length, right? It says that the number of existing households, if you break them out by income bracket, don't match the number of existing units that we have that are affordable at each income bracket. So although we still have the 39,000 households that need housing, we're providing 39,000 new housing units. This says that in addition to that, we also need to provide 81,000 new units to account for every mismatched household, plus a 5% vacancy rate on top of that. That we found a bit concerning, and we raised that several times in conversation with the consultant, because the consultant acknowledged that this is an overcount of actual housing structures when they did the plan for Oregon. So basically we said structural mismatch shouldn't be presented as a number of housing units needed, because the households identified in that calculation do have housing units. It's just the wrong price. So the calculation tells us how many households are paying either too much or too little for their housing, but not how many households need a physical new unit built. And what we propose is, instead, we're saying of 120,000-ish households, we do need about 39,000 new constructed units to account for underproduction and homelessness, and that's quite in line with what we did as a group. The structural mismatch, we're saying about 81,000 households have homes, but they might need some sort of financial assistance. That may be direct to households, or that might be using techniques to make existing housing that we have less expensive, or to think about when we're constructing those new units for underproduction and homelessness, looking at the mismatch and the needs and applying that to those new units that we're building. So report takeaways, what we didn't see, we really wanted to see a delineation. I think it could be a really easy switch in the report to say that underproduction and homelessness is a measurement of new units needed. Structural mismatch represents a calculation of households that need assistance or housing units that need to be made more affordable, as opposed to a measurement of new units that need to be constructed. But what we did see was, I put some quotes in here from the report. It's likely that when developing an official methodology, further refinement would happen to the specific components of need. Methodologies must be aligned with implementation considerations, and if a policy priority were to reduce cost burdening, demand side actions like vouchers could be used to meet allocated need. So they didn't come right out and say that not providing specifically new units is the only way to comply with this. But they are saying that we should examine alternatives. For allocation, this I think is going to be most different from what is in the proposed legislation, because the proposed legislation still uses the Open Communities Alliance or adjacent allocation methodology, which is the baseline model. But the report recommended approach B, which allocates units based on affordability in a municipality relative to the region, the production rate in a municipality relative to the region, and then access to jobs on a statewide basis. So that was obviously, like I said, affordability compared to the regional average and how many units each municipality needs to reach the regional average. Production, so how many units you would need to produce to reach the regional average rate of production. And then access to jobs, either 30 minutes by car or 60 minutes by transit to a job destination. We were concerned that these allocation methodologies were disconnected from state policies like the growth management principles and the plan of conservation and development, that a statewide approach doesn't have enough sensitivity on the town level. And so it kind of makes all of our towns in the region look very similar, with the exception of Middletown. And it's a snapshot in time that can change very quickly, particularly with regards to the production rates. Our takeaways, what we didn't see in the report, we didn't see a direct integration of allocation factors with the state C&D plan or the balancing of housing with other state goals. For example, when we're looking at production rate of housing, they're only looking at whether housing has or hasn't been built in a town, not whether there are any underlying reasons for why housing has or hasn't been built in a town. So one town may be building a lot of housing because it has a lot of infrastructure, a lot of land. It has a good, it's a hot market for building. Another town might not see a lot of development because maybe it's a lot of wetland or ledge, or it's really hard and expensive to build there. None of those things are really taken into account. So we wanted to see that, we didn't. We did see some of these quotes I have on here, they're quite long. I guess basically I'll summarize these because you have the presentation, but we saw a lot of references in the report to needing to refine these methodologies and the inputs to make sure that they do align with state goals, and to do a lot of monitoring and feedback to make sure that you can mitigate for any unintended consequences if you see them arising. So it needs to be adaptive and flexible and needs to be monitored regularly, which I think is a good thing to know. It makes a lot of sense. Oh, also, it suggests that the state needs to provide additional data for us to do really good planning, which I like to see. This kind of relates back to our earlier question. There's no discussion in the report, which we wanted to see, about how using a state allocation relates to Section 830G, because typically, doing the allocation and a fair share says that municipalities need to use their zoning to create more housing opportunity, where 830G says ignore zoning to create more housing opportunity. So there's a trade-off there that's not really being addressed. What is the point of doing all the zoning exercises if a developer wanted to build affordable housing, they could use 830G anyways. So we didn't see a discussion or analysis of that relationship. They might have a workaround for that, but it just wasn't in the report. We did see the foundational question in any fair share approach is how to interpret a local allocation. That could be zoning to allow housing to be developed, or it could be removing barriers and actively encouraging and incentivizing housing production. As Connecticut develops housing policy, it should consider implementation in the context of other existing and future programs. And the need for different policies to work together toward a common goal is identified in the research literature. So all of these things point to an understanding of a more comprehensive approach. And the key takeaways from the report, which I don't know if this is being taken very seriously with current legislation, but the report takeaways are that this should be the beginning, not the end of the process. Direct quotes, the study should be considered a roadmap for policymakers and advocates to continue developing an official fair share or housing needs analysis program. Most states with fair share or housing needs analysis programs have taken years to iterate what stakeholders, advocates, planners, builders, and local governments find the most suitable approach. And while much work remains, clear goals and policy priorities can help direct efforts towards a successful outcome. So should be the beginning of the process, not the end of the process. We do, based on conversations with the other COGs, with legislators, we think that there's going to be room even after this bill is adopted to continue having conversations to make refinements and tweaks. And some of the stuff that's in here, we know just from review, at least as it was on Friday, wouldn't be practically workable. It's not implementable as written, so we know there's going to be some troubleshooting as well, and we plan to be part of those conversations. It's a good start. We want to be part of the conversations to help it move forward, and I think based on the work that we've done, we're in a really good position to have those conversations.
Thank you, Megan, for that update. Any questions on that?
Ben has his hand up. I don't think you can see.
Oh,
Yeah, just wanted to make a comment again. It's not passed till it's passed, but the current amendment additionally modifies the fair share language statute that called for the study and basically says that the OPM will be responsible for updating it every 10 years. It also says that for those individual towns, right, there's there's a, like, it's like 80% of the net list grandized. I haven't seen specifically what that spits out as far as what towns. But for those who are required to pass what they call a priority affordable housing plan, in that plan, you are allowed to essentially pitch to the the Affordable Housing Task Force, an alternative fair share number that is different than the one, and they would, as amended right now, have the ability to review that proposed number and consider that to be your new number. If you are the language says if you are one that has to write one of those plans and you do not present an alternative number to your fair share allocation number, that you would basically say, I'm accepting that this number is the one that it is. And that is new language that got added in the amendment to the amendment. So definitely some modifications. Also, the new amendment to the amendment would only require towns to plan for 25% of their fair share allocation, but then it also would require you to plan for, of that component, specific housing underneath that 25%, which further complicates kind of how it would function. But again, all of this is relatively new, and it is showing some flexibility on how the state would be moving forward with this. But again, has to pass both chambers and get signed into law before this would take impact. If none of this goes through, be aware that the current standing legislation would exist. There would be no change.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay.
I think we're all set up if you guys want to see the logo.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen.
Oh, you would turn your.
Oh, yeah.
You're under pressure. It's okay.
Okay. Sharing the screen, that's the worst.
Hold on.
Did we go through the agenda?
I think so, yeah. I think that was everything, right, Pat? Did we miss anything?
Yeah, yep. Unless, any final comments from anybody or something anyone wants to share, but otherwise we're all set, so.
Right. We can see our tabs.
Almost there.
It said it was sharing or? Sorry, I haven't shared on the Zoom call and I don't know how long.
Also, you have a Mac, I don't know how to do.
I know.
Wait. Oh,
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Don't push too many buttons. It'll go away.
There we go. Okay, and then that's the logo with the title of the project, Share Foundations, Housing Solutions through Collaborative Learning, and then I made like a little animation to go along with it. But that's our logo.
We are official.
Yeah.
Official. Yeah.
Very nice.
So this is gonna be like our intro and outro on our videos, and we'll use it to brand things, and it has all our RiverCog colors in it. And the goal was to emphasize the collaborative approach that we are learning together. Yeah.
Looks
We're
good.
very excited.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you, Ella.
Thank you, Ella.
All right. I know my head's about to explode after listening to all that fair share and all the updates from Hartford. So unless anybody has anything else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, I heard a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dan.
Dan. All right. meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Next
you.
month will be what, June 24th?
Yep.
June 24th, so.
All
All
right.
right.
Eliza and Megan, is this the RiverCog Zoom?
Yes,
Would you be
Gonna
able to stick
chat?
on just for 5 minutes after?
yeah.
Bye, have you.
All right,
Perfect.
bye, everyone.
Have a good one.
Everybody, thank you.
Is that just the note taker there? Oh yeah, like
I can sign off. I don't need to share anything else, right? I can sign off of here.
I think, Bill Warner is probably
Walked away.
not really there. Let me,
You can map.
you could. Yeah, so I just wanted to check in. I put in for the request for payment, but I don't know if it went through.
Oh, we got it.
we got it, we're
Okay,
good, yeah.
yeah, they don't tell me. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. So just make sure to review the language so that you follow the reporting requirements. We were having, I'm learning them and what's in there as well. So just double check with Paula to make sure there's like a requirement to produce like an audit once it is available. Post in it, section 4.6. It's nothing added, like it's what you get done already, and then we just receive it.
Okay.
But yeah, just double check all of that, and then make sure to follow the 6 month. There's like a 6 month expenditure report. Like I said, just make sure to follow that. I think I put it in your chart for your quarterly report.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
anything comes up, let me know. And then just keep track. Like I said, there's an expenditures report. So if you end up, I think for the most part, it's my understanding the bulk of it is going to just be labor. But if you end up, there is language that allows for you to use the money to subcontract if you need to do that to complete. You're ultimately required to complete the responsibilities in there. But if you go to subcontractor, just make sure that you keep track of that in the expenditures of the grant funds. But if it's mostly, like I said, I'm sure you guys are probably coding it how you used to, so it shouldn't really be a problem when you're pulling it out.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your reporting on it, like I said, you're more than welcome to tie that into the one that we created as the quarterly additionally or separately. But I just wanted to check real quick to see if if the funding, like the request went through, because they don't tell me. I just put it into the financials. So
It came through the day that Ella started, so we were very relieved.
Good.
We can pay you.
good. All right. Well, if anything comes up, let me know. Good luck with getting everything started. Looks like you're on the right path. And yeah, if there's any we might reach out to you at some point in time. I know that the agency is planning our next annual affordable housing, like our housing DOH housing convention thing that we've done the last few years. I may pitch a panel talking about sort of updating, because now we have a regional project through you.
Yeah.
We have Canton doing one, and then we have another one that's happening. And so I was thinking about having people, so I may reach out to you if they are asking for panels. The commissioner may ask me to do that. So I'll keep you in the loop, but good luck with getting everything started and rolling on this. If anything comes up, just reach out. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it was pretty well received, the rollout today.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
pretty good.
They actually talked,
Which was good,
yeah.
more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, I was interested in like everyone's gone, right? I was interested in,
Hold on. Let me just do this.